Safety and Justice Subcommittee. I'm the committee chairman, Representative Inamdi Chukwucha. We'll begin our meeting by starting with attendance. I will ask staff to take attendance.
Representative Inamdi Chukwucha.
Present.
Kyle Myers. Gilmore Crosby.
Present.
Tainita Congo. Spencer Price. James Sherrard.
Present.
Karen Holland. Dr. Michelle Radcliffe. Dr. Tana Connell. Lisa Minatola.
Present.
James Diana.
Present.
Chief Deputy AG Alex Mackler.
Present.
Captain Fahim Akil. I believe we have a proxy for Captain Fahim Akil. Representative Moore. Is our proxy for Captain Fahim Akil John Rago?
The proxy was Chief Tracy, and also
Chief Tracy.
Dr. Mullen was present.
Okay. Just give me one moment to make sure we've reached quorum.
Appreciate it.
As of right now, I've counted 6 members. We have people in the Okay, now I'm seeing Robert Tracy, so we have reached a quorum.
All right, great. Thank you. Appreciate it. Can we go? So the first agenda item is the acceptance of the January 21st and the February 18th minutes. The meeting minutes were sent out along with the meeting notice. Are there any corrections that need to be noted? If there are none, I will accept a motion to accept the minutes for the January 21st and February 18th meeting.
So moved. This is James Sherrard.
Thank you, Mr. Sherrard. May I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and second that we accept the meeting minutes for January 21st and February 18th. I will now ask staff to call the roll for a vote.
Representative Inamdi Chukwucha.
Yes.
Kyle Myers. Gilmore Crosby.
Yes.
Tainita Congo. Spencer Price. James Sherrard.
Yes.
Karen Holland. Dr. Michelle Radcliffe. Dr. Tana Connell. Lisa Minatola.
Yes.
James Diana.
Yes.
Chief Deputy AG Alex Mackler.
Yes.
Dr. Julius Mullen.
Abstain. I wasn't present.
Captain Fahim Akil.
Chief Tracy for Captain Akil, yes.
Thank you. Representative Moore. Okay, so the meeting minutes have been accepted.
muted. Our next agenda item was to move forward to share our recommendations from our subcommittee that will be presented to the full body. Wanted to take a quick second just to give a very quick recap of where we are and how we got here. As many of you know, the Delaware Legislative Black Caucus created the African American Task Force in the 150 General Assembly. And with that, we created the Law Enforcement Accountability Task Force, along with subcommittees that dealt with health. We also had infrastructure and environment, economics, and the Safety and Justice Subcommittee. And in the 151st General Assembly, we added an additional subcommittee that dealt with education. Our goal is to ensure that recommendations that are meeting the disparities, addressing the disparities felt among African Americans and communities of color throughout our state. Our initial charge, I guess our initial goal was to look at gun violence and community violence in our communities. And it became very lofty, stretching far beyond just that initial thought of firearms, illegal firearms, but also stemmed into mental health issues. We were presented with some juvenile justice and adult justice issues, as well as reentry and also Department of Corrections. So it really expanded our charge. So we end up creating subcommittees for our, working groups within our subcommittees. So we have subcommittees that dealt with firearms, justice, and then we had one for mental health and community planning. So today what we're going to do is to present those and then to vote on the recommendations to send to the full body. The next full African American Task Force meeting is next month. So we wanted to have our recommendations set to present to them then. So we can move forward with the first group of recommendations from firearms. And I will say as well that many of the recommendations come from our previous meetings, whether it was through the presentations from our guest presenters or from discussions that were presented for us. The first group with firearms, we wanted to advance the common sense gun legislation. As many of you know, we had one of our presenters was Every Town, and this was something that they championed as well. We are currently working within our state legislator with the permit to purchase, which ensures that members of our communities who are gun owners are safely trained and they undergo background checks. And it also helps to keep illegal firearms out of the hands of individuals who are prohibited. Increased straw purchases, penalties for straw purchase offenders, and Deputy Attorney General Mackler is on. This was something that comes from the Attorney General's office, something that we look forward to pushing forward. It's one of the areas that of grave concern for this committee because many of the firearm offenses are committed by individuals who shouldn't have them, and oftentimes they are straw purchases. Next slide, please. Safe firearms storage legislation, and that's related to ensuring that firearms are stored in a responsible manner to keep them out of the hands of children and other individuals who shouldn't have them. And then holding individuals who do commit violent harm to our communities accountable. That has been something that our General Assembly and the Delaware Legislative Black Caucus has really championed and really want to continue that as a mantra for our recommendation and going forward with our work. I mentioned as well, Every Town who presented to our subcommittee. They have grant opportunities for states to participate in their programs and services that will support them with establishing supports for suppression strategies within their state for illegal firearms. They work with law enforcement as well as community-based entities. So it is our recommendation that our state apply to become a member of that with receiving one of those grants. Next slide, please. To expand and enhance the Wilmington Police Department, U.S. Department of Justice, and the Delaware Attorney General's Gun Stat program. Again, I mentioned that General Mackler is with us, as well as Chief Tracy. This has been an initiative that has been going very well. It's off to a great start in the city of Wilmington, really having a huge impact. And it's our recommendation that we not only continue it, but find ways to expand it, as well as replicate it into the areas of Dover. So trying to find supports to do that. On the call as well, we have a representative from the mayor's office. Mr. John Rago has joined us, and the mayor's, as a part of his new initiative against gun violence and community violence, is the Building Safer Communities initiative. Is something that he spoke about. It's a brand new initiative in the city. He mentioned it in his mayor's address. And what we wanted to do is to ensure that we had it inside of our recommendations. So once they finish the planning and is ready to be implemented, it can surely be included in the initiatives that we want to support through the work of this Safety and Justice Subcommittee and for the full African American Task Force. So those are the recommendations for firearms. And they came from majority from our presentations and then from our work. I did want to just give 1 second and to ask Deputy AG Mackler if he had any additional feedback. He was very key in helping to develop these, sir.
Thank you, Representative, and I apologize for being in the car. I can't say it any better than you just did, and I know Chief Tracy could give song and verse on this. The only thing I want to add is to amplify that if we are serious about getting at gun offenders and getting at gun violence, not just in the city of Wilmington and in our African-American communities, but statewide, we have to be serious about using getting more tools in the toolbox to go after straw purchasers. You spoke very eloquently about that. And we totally support the recommendations. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, G. Mackler. Chief Tracy, it is an added bonus to have you on with us today. So if you wanted to speak a little about these recommendations, I would welcome it now, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, Representative, thank you very much. I like Alex Mackler. I just got up to my office from being in the car, so I'm sitting in my seat. So I think these are great things that we've been talking about for a few years, and some things are coming to fruition now as we come out of the pandemic. The enhanced gun stat, it wasn't like we were not doing this before, but now we've added a few elements to it that, you know, there's going to be definitely consequence, and we're looking at each person that possesses a firearm, an illegal firearm, in the city of Wilmington and the surrounding areas, to make sure that there's some consequence of penalty, so it gets back out to the community. It's not okay to carry a firearm. As we know, 95% of our murders in the city of Wilmington are by gunshot. Therefore, the root cause is the people carrying firearms in our city. And then it's a gateway crime to murder, because it could be very impulsive when you have a firearm. And then that leads into our group violence intervention, which we just had our 4th call in. And as you can see, and if you're following some of the things in the city, as we're coming out of the pandemic and we're starting to get the in-person meetings and these programs get started back up, we just had our third call in November, and our 4th one with the group violence intervention that's run by John Cook out of the state, but with a partnership with the city. And what we do is, with all our resources, and Alex Mackler's on, and the Delaware Department of Justice and Attorney General's office is a great partner, as well as our U.S. Attorney, our state and county representatives in law enforcement, as well as our federal contingent of law enforcement efforts. And what we've seen in the last few months, because it's really shifting into gear, the group violence intervention has really reduced the amount of retaliatory shooting, especially with our younger individuals in the city of Wilmington and the surrounding area. What we have seen is some one-offs where we've seen more mature individuals, when I say mature, over 30 years old, get into some unique type of experiences where they've actually used the firearm against each other. And that's what we're kind of seeing now. But it's very promising for the first 3 months we're coming up at the end of the first quarter in the city of Wilmington. And this started back in December, that we're down almost 70% in murders from where we were 5 years ago. We're down 70% in shooting incidents where we were 5 years ago. We're down 70% in shooting victims and overall crimes down by 30-40%. So here's an opportunity here. We're also down compared to last year and the year before. So against the pandemic numbers and pre-pandemic, and we're getting out of the gate with some of the lowest numbers in 10 years. Now we have an opportunity with additional programming that I know John Rago is going to talk about. And I know what this committee is speaking about, because Fahima Keel does keep me apprised of what's going on, as well as our conversations representative. So I'm very hopeful. I'm very, about where we've started this year and the additional things that this committee is bringing out, and all the other things coming together. And this goes with health services, education, the community, the faith-based community, the business community. So as we're coming together and bringing all these resources together, and I know there's additional ones that John Rago will start hitting on with the mayor and what you're doing, this helps us enhance this to keep our community safer, keep the guns out of the hands of people it doesn't belong in, and make sure that people are not buying these guns, the loophole of buying these guns that Alex Mackler talked about. I see us getting to a better place and building off the momentum that we had. So thank you very much. If there's anything else that you want me to hit on, sir, I'd be more than happy to.
No, that's it, Chief. I greatly appreciate it. Again, thank you for being here, and really appreciative of all the time that Captain Nikhil and his devotion to helping us get to where we are today. I will that I have the building safer communities here in the firearms part when it should have been in the community part. So we'll just come back to John Rago later, but it is really a part of that community section. It should have been there, but I placed it in the wrong spot. But it is something that we want to mention about in our community planning initiative. So if we can go to the voting for these recommendations to present these as our recommendations for the full committee.
Yes. Would you like me to take the roll?
Yes, please.
Representative Namdi Chukwucha,
Yes.
Kyle Myers, Gilmore Crosby,
Yes.
Tainita Congo, Spencer Price, James Sherrard,
Yes.
Karen Holland, Dr. Michelle Radcliffe,
Yes.
Dr. Tana Connell, Lisa Minatola,
Yes.
James Diana,
Yes.
Chief Deputy AG Alex Mackler,
Yes.
Dr. Julius Mullen,
Yes.
Captain Fahima Keel,
Chief Tracy for Captain Akil, yes.
thank you, Representative Sharia Moore. The recommendations have passed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. That was our first subset. And we will go now to the next working group. As we had mentioned that justice issues became a part of ours, one of our presenters was the Brennan Center for Justice, and they presented about felony disenfranchisement. We just had another meeting about it today on working to restore individuals' voting rights once they have completed their sentence. And what we realize is that ways in which we help individuals begin to reestablish themselves and be a part of the community, and something as simple as having your voting rights is very important. So there is currently legislation being developed. Hopefully we can, we have to, because it requires a constitutional amendment. So it has to be 2 concurrent sessions. So we're going to work very hard to get this legislation developed and pass this session, so we can come back next session and do the follow-up that's needed. The second is to support the establishment of Office of Violence Reduction in local municipalities, focusing on non-law enforcement issues. And that's pretty similar to what we mentioned earlier about the community supports. And there were a couple of cities, mainly Chicago was one of the ones, in a couple of cities in California that had established these offices. And we just thought it was a great way to really focus on the issues of community and how it's very important for the community to be involved. And the third was to increase funding and support for family reentry programming that's providing housing. That was one of the things that came up during our presentation that we had from the Apex group. They mentioned about support services, and that was one of the areas. So we'll now move forward on those justice recommendations.
Representative Namdi Chakocha,
Yes.
Kyle Myers, Gilmore Crosby,
Yes.
Tainita Congo, Spencer Price,
I'm sorry. Oh no, we're going to do hers later. I'm sorry. I got it. Because my sheet was different. I'm sorry. Please continue.
Spencer Price, James Sherrard,
Yes.
Karen Holland, Dr. Michelle Radcliffe,
Yes.
Dr. Tana Connell, Lisa Minatola,
Yes.
James Diana,
Yes.
Chief Deputy AG Alex Mackler,
Yes, sorry.
Dr. Julius Mullen,
Yes.
Captain Fahim Akil,
Chief Tracy for Captain Fahim Akil, yes.
Representative Moore, and the recommendations have passed.
Thank you.
And then,
And yes, so, yeah, definitely wanted to present and as a part, and it was included in the justice, but we're going to make it really separate because a lot of the recommendations that deal with expungement and pardons, they were a part of what we felt our justice package, but they really stood on their own. And just great thank you, huge thank you to Ms. Minatola for her support in helping to arrange these recommendations and to present them. So with that, I will allow Ms. Minatola to present the recommendations for expungement pardons.
Thank you, Representative. The recommendations around expungements and pardons really go to the barriers that we have seen that make it more difficult for individuals to achieve records clearance. For the last several months, there has been a group of stakeholders that have been meeting to discuss expungement and pardons, and that includes representatives from the Department of Justice, from my office, from Apex, and from other community partners like Delaware Volunteer Legal Services and the ACLU. Around that, there was a presentation to this group from Apex and from Eliza Hurst, who is the post-disposition attorney in our office. What we have identified as some of the barriers are as follows. The first is that the certified criminal records that are obtained from the State Bureau of Identifications have differing timeframes depending on what type of records clearance is being sought. For mandatory expungements, it's 30 days. For discretionary expungements, it's 45 days. And for pardons, it's 90 days before that record expires. Our request would be to standardize that and to make it a 90-day window in which those records are valid in order to be acted on for either expungements or pardons. The second recommendation is around the financial burdens. Currently, there is a $52 charge to obtain a certified criminal record from the State Bureau of Identifications. And then for adults, for a mandatory expungement, a $75 fee from the State Bureau of Identifications, or a $75 filing fee for a discretionary expungement in Superior Court. In addition, for pardons, there are records fees that are associated with obtaining the dockets and other certified records that are needed to attach to the pardon petitions. And for certain very serious offenses, there is also a requirement for a psychological evaluation that can cost somewhere within thousands of dollars at times. The recommendations are as follows. One would be to allow a free copy of a criminal history. It doesn't have to be a certified copy, but a free copy of the criminal history to be obtained by an individual at least once a year so they can understand what is on their record and determine what they're eligible for. And the other would be provide some kind of grant funding or other financial assistance with the fees that are needed in order to obtain records clearance. The third recommendation is around location. Currently, in order to start this process, the certified record needs to be obtained at 1 of 3 locations from SBI, either Troop 2 in the Newark Bear area, the SBI headquarters in Dover, or the Adams Service Center in Georgetown. The recommendation would be to either provide funding to SBI for a mobile van service that would allow fingerprinting to be done in locations other than at those three areas. We have talked to SBI about this, and I believe it's something they are interested in. The other recommendation would be to allow an area in Wilmington to be accessible for fingerprinting so that our clients do not have to travel to Newark and Bear, to get those fingerprints at SBI at Troop 2. We find that the transportation is a major barrier for many of our clients. And then finally, the Board of Pardons currently is only having in-person hearings in Dover. The recommendation would be for those to rotate among all three counties. So therefore, again, it would be easier for people to get there who have transportation issues. The final recommendation is eligibility with regard to expungements. Currently, if an individual has multiple misdemeanor convictions on their records from different disposition dates, they do not qualify for a discretionary expungement unless they have first obtained a pardon. In addition, sometimes there are old or pending charges on the record that have not been resolved and create a barrier because until those are, the disposition is determined, a person cannot move forward. The recommendation will be twofold. The first would be to amend the adult expungement statute so that individuals with multiple nonviolent misdemeanor convictions will be eligible for a discretionary expungement after a period of time has passed. That obviously will be up to the legislature as to what that period would be, but we would suggest 7 years, which is equivalent to what is going on if there is a single felony conviction or certain other misdemeanor convictions under the discretionary expungement statute. And the other recommendation would be to have SBI automatically purge some old records where there are matters where there is a disposition that is either pending or unobtainable after a certain amount of years have passed. And that's all the recommendations. Thank you, Representative.
Thank you, Ms. Minatola, and thank you for those recommendations. They truly speak about, I guess, the intent of this committee as we began to expand and realize that it was so much more than just looking at gun violence and community violence. There were so many other issues and areas that we could address to this committee, and it became so lofty, but really looking at expungements and pardons, it became very keen, and these recommendations really show the true everyday hurdles. I mean, real life hurdles and obstacles that so many of our constituents are facing. So thank you again for the work on these expungements and pardon recommendations, and we can move forward with the vote. Thank you again.
Okay, I'll begin the roll. Representative Nandi Chikocha,
Yes.
Kyle Myers, Gilmore Crosby,
Yes.
Tainita Congo, Spencer Price, James Sherrard,
Yes.
Karen Holland, Dr. Michelle Radcliffe,
Yes.
Dr. Tana Connell, Lisa Minatola,
Yes.
James Diana,
Yes.
Chief Deputy AG Alex Mackler.
I'm Representative Chukwuocha. I'm going to vote yes. I just want to make a brief comment on the very last recommendation. We're just going to have to take a look at the language. I want to make sure that when we're talking about getting rid of pending matters, if they involve victims who can be with whom contact can be made, we're just going to want to pay close attention to that language. But we're certainly we certainly agree and are strongly behind all the policy implications here.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Julius Mullen,
Yes.
Captain Fahim Akil,
Chief Tracy for Captain Fahim Akil, yes.
Representative Sharia Moore. And the recommendations have passed. Thank you.
Our next working group dealt with the mental health issues, and regardless of what area we spoke about, mental health really became a keen focus from our community to the individuals with the guns, individuals for on reentry, or individuals inside of DOC. It became very essential to this work and our recommendations that it had to be included mental health. So we sought to establish and fund more community-based mental health services for communities that have been impacted by gun and community violence. There is current legislation that is sponsored by our U.S. Senator Chris Coons, the Prevention Addressing Trauma Health Services Act, or PAVS, which is currently in the Senate. So hopefully it will come forward and it will provide states the opportunity to receive additional funding and support for these type of supports inside of communities of need. The second is to provide trauma therapy for those who are within our prisons, for those who are inside of our prisons, along with staff training and supports, and for our correctional institutions to make them more trauma-informed environments, as well as to evaluate the current mental health support services that are available within our state for our returning citizens and their families to provide greater alignment for trauma-informed care. And the last recommendation was to establish a fund that would support law enforcement agencies with creating mental health support units that will respond to mental health or substance abuse crisis. Many of these recommendations stem from our presentations we received from our DOC agency, as well as from the Hope Commission, who were presenters, and just speaking about some of the challenges that their clients face and looking at ways to we can support them and indeed with that mental health issues as individuals are returning to our community, provide greater levels of support. We will now take the vote for the mental health recommendations.
Representative Namdi Chukocha,
Yes.
Kyle Myers, Gilmore Crosby,
Yes.
Tainita Congo, Spencer Price, James Sherrard,
Yes.
Karen Holland, Dr. Michelle Radcliffe,
Yes.
Dr. Tana Connell, Lisa Minatola,
Yes.
James Diana,
Yes.
Chief Deputy AG Alex Mackler, Dr. Julius Mullen,
Yes.
Captain Fahim Akil,
Sorry about that. Chief Tracy for Captain Fahim Akil. I'm voting yes, but just with the last bullet point, I just want to make it clear that although working together, we do work together as response with the state agencies for mental health and substance abuse issues almost on a daily basis, just to make sure that we qualify this with sometimes the 911 runs, and sometimes it could be violence or weapons. So I want to make clear that it doesn't replace, but we work together. And then we continue to make sure that our officers, we continue to talk about making sure the training for our officers dealing with mental health issues through crisis intervention training is also kind of recognized in there, because sometimes we are the first ones to respond there. And then our department and a lot of departments throughout the state are actually trained in this. And then juvenile crisis intervention training is the next step. And these are courses that we take throughout the year to understand these issues, to make sure that we can de-escalate. And some of those things working together, sometimes it doesn't always work out. We are the first on the scene because there might be violence and a weapon, but we're certainly looking for other ways to offset calls for service to make sure that we have the individuals out there to assist and work together.
Excellent. Thank you, Chief. Those are great points, and we will definitely make a point to add those into that recommendation. Thank you, sir.
and then Representative Moore. And then that means the recommendations have passed. Thank you. And I also just want to note that these recommendations will go into the final report. So you can always send over anything that you think should be included for the recommendations, and we'll be able to send that over to our other staff support, Caitlin Del Calo.
And our final working group was the community planning group. And a note is I guess the role of this group was just as important as the role of law enforcement, is the role of impacted communities themselves to bring forth solutions to gun/community violence. And it was really just thinking about the ways in which communities are involved, and we build that sense of community in their own resilience, in their own internal systems of support, and how we just build that sense of there is a way forward, and giving them hope rather than the hopelessness many communities feel in terms of dealing with gun and community violence. So our recommendations, in one of our presenters was the GVI. Initially, one of our first meetings was with GVI, and they came in and presented to us. So our recommendation is to enhance the current GVI efforts by creating, of course, additional funding and supports, but also to tie with the GVI, the Wilmington Community Advisory Council in their recommendations, and working with the Center for Structural Equity. And they'd have targeted supports targeted toward youth and youth offenders in communities with high rates of gun and community violence. The second recommendation was to develop a firearms prevention education campaign, which targets impacted areas within our state and is particularly implemented within our high needs schools and communities. The third one was to provide supports for community-based programming rooted in increasing awareness for the CDC framework, which acknowledges gun violence as a public health crisis, and that's implemented through violence intervention, prevention services, individuals, group and community, as well as engagement in alliances and community-based partnerships that are designed to reduce gun and community violence. And it's at this point where I think that the Building Safer Communities initiative that is being sponsored, recommended for the city of Wilmington was mentioned earlier, and this was the place where it should have been. So I'm hopeful that my colleague and friend, representative of the mayor's office, Mr. John Rago, is still with us. Maybe if he could speak a little bit about that campaign and just how it goes into the community planning, I would appreciate it.
Thanks, Representative Chikwocha. You know, it's exciting to hear all that you're working on and all that you've just voted on. This couldn't fit in any better than what you've just explained in terms of community planning. And on behalf of the mayor and our Chief of Staff, Tanny Washington, the mayor has set aside $8 million from the ARPA funds for what's called Building Safer Communities. And so we understand, just as we have money on this for neighborhood reinvestment and for stabilization and strengthening, we have a once in a lifetime opportunity here with the ARPA funding. And now if you move, and just as you've said here, there is more to this than law enforcement. We know that, and we've known that for years. We now have an opportunity to do something more about it. And so this entire effort is a collaboration with local community-based organizations that have been doing this kind of work for a number of years. We also, the mayor was born, by the way, in Newark, New Jersey. And interestingly enough, Newark, New Jersey is having some success in reducing gun violence. And so that was noted by members of our city council and also members of the community. So a number of people from Wilmington took a trip to Newark, New Jersey. And so the effort that is underway there, we're going to have a community assessment done here in Wilmington. And we're going to take the results of that community assessment to help us further this community-based effort to fund some of the nonprofits that are out there doing the work. So we know this is all about redirecting lives, changing behaviors. And as we get into this work in the community, as we say in the trenches, every day on our streets, we know that this is all about mental and physical health. It's about education. It's about employment. So it's all related to reducing gun violence. but there's so much work to do. And as Representative Chakotcha just said a few moments ago, there is a way forward. We know that. We have money now to help us move forward. And so we're determined here in Wilmington to finally be able to make some progress on this front. So thank you for the opportunity to present that.
I appreciate it, John. I really thank you. I know it's a fresh initiative, brand new off the press, but I really wanted to ensure that it was included in our recommendation because I think it really has the potential to have the impact that we really want. And I think it's definitely something that the African American Task Force would want to stand behind and support.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much. I know the mayor will be thrilled to hear this and Tanny Washington, happy to share that with them. And thanks for all that you're doing. The AG's office is there. We appreciate working with the AG's office on a variety of things here in the city. And so thank you all, very much for this opportunity.
Excellent. Thanks, John. Appreciate it. So we can now move forward with the voting for the community planning recommendations.
Representative Namdi Chakotcha,
Yes.
Kyle Myers, Gilmore Crosby,
Yes.
Tainita Congo, Spencer Price, James Sherrard,
Yes.
Karen Holland, Dr. Michelle Radcliffe, Dr. Tana Connell, Lisa Minatola,
Yes.
James Diana,
Yes.
Chief Deputy AG Alex Mackler,
Yes.
Dr. Julius Mullen,
Yes.
Captain Fahim Akil,
Chief Tracy for Captain Fahim Akil, yes.
and Representative Moore, and the recommendations have passed. So registered attendees can use the raise hand function on Zoom to indicate they would like to make public comment. Also, public comments can be emailed to African American Task Force at delaware.gov. I will check the participants list for any raised hands. There's no public comment at this time.
Excellent. Well, I would like to just take the time to thank everyone for not only participating today, but throughout the process for the Safety and Justice Subcommittee. There are a few individuals I wanted to thank and organizations, those who have contributed. Our Law Enforcement Accountability Task Force and Representative Frank Cook, who leads that. Thank him for his support and his engagement with me throughout this process. The Wilmington Mayor, Mike Przicki, Dover Mayor, Mayor Christensen, for former DOC Commissioner Clara DeMattis and the current Commissioner, as well as the Chief of Planning for DOC, Ms. Jessica Klein, Howard R. Young, Warden Akinbayo, and as well as the men from the Howard Young facility who were all gun offenders who participated in a discussion with Representative Frank Cook and I, which was very informative and really guided a lot of how we went about from the very beginning, approaching our work on this subcommittee. The Department of Services for Children, Youth, and Families, Secretary Manning, Division of Youth Rehabilitative Services, the Director Renee Kikantine, and Mr. Yateman, Interfaith Community Housing with their Western City Youth Ambassadors, the Cultural Restoration Project, the Brown Boys and Girls Club Teen Center, and the Brennan Center for Justice, Patrick Berry, Stuart Baum. And the next page, and I know someone who was missing on here was GVI with the former Chief Cummings. They presented one of our early presenters. They were missing. Chief Tracy, who was here with us today, Dover Police Chief Johnson, Wilmington Hope Commission, Dr. Deborah Mason, the Office of Defense Services, Ms. Eliza Hertz, Apex, who presented Ms. Sherwood and Mr. Duncan, the Wilmington Community Advisory Committee with Dr. Hanifa Shabazz, Dr. Henry Smith, Dr. Gwen Angelette, and Mr. Wolfie Chambers, Everytown for Gun Safety, Ms. Nugent, as well as the Moms Demand Action, and all of the members of this subcommittee. I truly thank those who are present today, as well as those who are not able to be here today. But this committee, I mean, when we were from the very beginning of really thinking of ways in which we wanted to try to address the disparities, this committee was the only committee I even had any thought of wanting to lead and to really push forward some recommendations that I felt could make a difference in our community. I am extremely humbled by our efforts, and I really think they're going to make a great recommendation to our complete recommendations for the African American Task Force. Special thank you to Ms. Minatola for her work, to Deputy AG Mackler for his support, Dr. Julius Mulling, Captain from Hemokill, and Mr. Gilmore Crosby for all of their work on each of the working groups, as well as the supports for our committee through our staff, Ms. Sophia Vassar, Caitlin DiCarlo, and Ms. Chelsea Jones, who is with us today, as well as DTI. Without them, none of this could have taken place. So I'm really very appreciative of their work. Thank everyone for just your participation and your just supporting the members of the Delaware Legislative Black Caucus in our efforts to try to make a difference in communities of color throughout our state. So with that, again, I would thank everyone for your participation. Again, our next steps for the African American Task Force, we will have our final meeting, which will be held next month, where all of the subcommittees will present their recommendations. And it is our goal to, once we have the recommendations, to present and to hopefully have funding and support for each of our subcommittees and for our task force as a whole. One of the recommendations is to work with Delaware State University to create a body that will continue the work of all of our subcommittees. And so we're not just going to go away after our recommendations, but it will be an informal body that is created to continue on the work of the African American Task Force. So that's one of the big recommendations. So everyone, your work is not in vain. Again, it's very greatly appreciated. I thank you sincerely from the bottom of my heart for family members I've lost recently, as well as those I lost over a decade ago to the violence in my community that I represent. This is something that will make a difference. I believe all of our recommendations are truly, no matter how simple they may seem, they will make a difference, and they will help us create a greater sense of well-being, and they will make our community safer. They will make our state safer. So I thank everyone for your participation. And I am just grateful for our work, and I can't wait to present these recommendations to the full body. And I thank you, and with that, I will accept a motion to adjourn. And unless there are any final comments from members of the committee.
Motion to adjourn. Representative, just like to say thank you for your effort. You've done a great job, because there are a lot of things that you've covered, and I certainly appreciate it down here in Lewis.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sherrod. Thank you, and thank you for being a great representative for that end of our state, because we know this is an end-to-end issue, and violence and safety and justice, it impacts all of us. So thank you for your involvement on this subcommittee. Really makes a difference, and I'm glad you were a part of it. So I appreciated the motion. I don't know if there were any additional comments or second to the motion.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for your participation as well.
Well, I also just want to add that I'm very impressed by the action. This thing's leading towards action and support of action. So thank goodness for that.
Yes, I thought you would like that, because when I seen a lot of the stuff coming from the mayor, especially with the building safer communities, that's right along the line of everything you sent and your recommendations and the work really geared toward getting our communities in a position where we can be supportive of community-based initiatives that are our role to support law enforcement and in increasing the safety within our community. So thank you, and thank you for the motion and the second. And with that, I will call officially into our subcommittee meeting. And again, thank you everyone for your participation.
Recording stopped.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Chelsea.